All right. Welcome to the Science of Getting Rich. Today we're going to be going over chapters 10, 11, and 12. How are you, Patrick?
Yeah, doing quite well. How about yourself?
Yep, getting there, surviving these strange times, making the best of it. Before we jump into the chapters, someone sent me a question that they want to know your thoughts on. So
Okay.
the message says this. Hi guys, thank you for the content that you're putting out during this time. I'm very interested about what Pat said on the last video about the work that he did on himself regarding the Hudson hierarchy with the love yourself element and the consequences that this had on his practice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, um, I've done a lot over the years. Basically, there's been several different programs. I've been doing personal growth work since I was about 18, I think. And it started off, I think we kind of came to it a little bit in the one call about 2 calls ago. And I think my first contact with it was Anthony Robbins. And it was Anthony Robbins. It was something to the effect of you have responsibility in your life. You know, you have the ability to respond, and that how we think, how we behave, how we act, whatnot. Like, we have a lot more control over our destiny than we give ourselves credit for. And it's whether we assume a responsible perspective or a victim perspective. And so that was probably the first thing. And I mean, I don't know how deep we want to go down that rabbit hole, but for me, it's just, I think we all come into the world and we get, like we're this wide open spirit, and we get our ego hurt, and you start to develop this ego shield, like, oh, I'm different from you, and I have this body, and there's out there, and there's in here, and that's how we kind of start to fragment from maybe the unity consciousness, maybe from, I don't know, universal. And you have this perspective, and you start building up this ego, and you realize you're different, and then something hurts, like somebody tells you no, or you feel abandonment, or
You get
it
triggered.
could be something stupid. What's that?
You get triggered about something.
Totally. And so there's deep parts of us that are wounded that we spend a lot of time building social masks to cover that up. And we start developing strategies to not feel that thing when somebody pushes our buttons, And so it's just trying to do a lot of work to kind of strip that away. And for me, I had a couple of big triggers, and one was not being smart enough. And I think that probably came from my dad. Like, he was probably one of the sharpest guys I've ever met, and he was always really, really, what's the word I'm looking for? Espabilado. Like, yeah, he's just a sharp guy, clever guy, switched on is the word I was looking for. And then the other thing was just loss, was like, I guess, abandonment. The very first memory I can remember was like having the whooping cough, and being in a bubble. And I was like 2 years old. And I remember, like, there's my family standing outside, and I felt completely vulnerable because I was naked. And I'm like, why is everybody staring at me? And I felt like, there's my parents. Why are they there? And I'm here. Why won't they? I just felt like the sense of abandonment, I think.
Wow,
And
that's a
then,
random one, being in the bubble. That's a strange one.
yeah. And my mom just passed away, and I was just talking to Rochelle. I was like, dude, that was a whooping cough. And I had the pertussis vaccine. I would love to ask my mom when that was in relationship to me having the whooping cough. But anyway, I don't want to go down this whole,
Yeah, but we digress.
rabbit hole. We could digress for a long time, but we have core wounds, right? And so for me, it was abandonment. And then, my father passed away when I was young. Several like intimate relationships, girlfriends splitting up. And then when my mom passed away, it's like that's my core thing, right? So I developed a lot of strategies around that to I need you to love me or want me or something like that, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
you need the
And so,
approval.
yeah, exactly. Constant external validation, right? And so that was what's showing up in my life. Like, the more I needed it, then the less I get it, obviously.
Mm.
And so I did this one program, and it really was very, very deep, and it had several levels and layers. But then did this thing. Rochelle and I did this diet. It's like basically it's where you remove all levels of external validation. So right when we very first started, we decided we were going to have a relationship, and we cut off Facebook. We cut off any type of external place where you check out. No alcohol, no sugar, no nothing checking out. No pornography, no sex, no like
That's
everything.
it's a dopamine detox, basically.
Yep.
Hmm.
Basically, yeah. Before they started calling it that, it was like yeah, basically that. Yeah, and anywhere where areas where you look for approval from other people, like the way you're dressed, the way you look, the way people react to you, if you connect with, people on the street and stuff like that, and it's like not even really making eye contact for this specified period of time, and it was brutal. It was brutal, but it just slowly starts shattering a lot of the need for external validation. So anyway, yeah, I don't know how far to go down that path, but that for me was probably one of the most powerful things I've ever done.
Yeah. Well, what I would extrapolate from that, like what you've just said about going to seminars and doing this detox and reading books and that kind of thing, there's not one thing that you're going to do. It's a constant process, and it's probably like having anxiety. Like, I don't think anxiety ever really goes away. You just learn how to deal with it. And with these like defense mechanisms that people have, and there might be some stuff that comes into your life and you're shown it and you know what to do, but it wasn't said in the way that you were meant to understand. Like, you guys have been telling us about the morning routine. I've been going to your seminars for 2 years, 3 years, and I've heard it over and over again. You need a morning routine. You need a morning routine. It was only recently that I started taking the morning routine actually really seriously. And I'm like, oh shit, like this is a game changer. But I could hear it enough times, but it was until I was ready to start doing it. That's when I implemented it, and you start feeling these changes. So it's not just one thing, one seminar that you can go to, one book that you read. It's a constant thing that you have to repeat doing, I think.
Completely. Yeah, it's something, it's a lifelong process. It's a lifelong journey. And I'm like, I'm so far from being an enlightened being, like I'm still working on this all the time. But the general gist of it was parts of ourselves that we haven't integrated, that we feel shameful about, that we have guilt around, or that we don't like, or we don't want other people to see. We put on a social mask, which is how we interact in society. And we do that to like not feel that feeling. And when we feel that feeling, we get triggered. So the thing is, like, to learn how to take off the mask as much as possible and be vulnerable in that. And the mask is all about going away from feeling that feeling. And so the idea is like, how can I actually go into feeling that feeling? And I'm feeling the feeling and I'm going, why does this trigger me? Or why does this bother me? So it's, rather than running away from it, it's like going into the grain. So if it's anxiety, you're actually, instead of like, okay, I need to do this, I need to move there, I need to move this energy. It's like, no, okay, I need to sit with this. Like, even to the point where you could just fall into a hole. But in diving into it and genuinely feeling it, it raises your capacity to be with that intense energy. So like, maybe the anxiety itself doesn't go away, maybe it does, but your capacity to be with this intense energy goes up, if that makes sense.
Awesome.
So,
well, I hope that helps answer the person's question.
I hope so.
All right, so let's jump into this. With chapter 10, this is interesting what you were saying about social media, dopamine detox. The note that I've taken here where it says, do not read books which tell you that the world is coming to an end, which is quite fitting in today's climate. Do not read the writings of muckrakers, blah, blah, blah. The note that I've taken there is, so don't read the news and don't fall into that hole of going on like social media and getting triggered by something and watching the constant stream of crap that's just propelled towards us on the news.
Yeah, I stopped watching the news 20 plus years ago. I didn't have a TV, just never paid attention to it. But then slowly but surely, like, I don't engage in that. I don't listen to news on the radio. I didn't like really get into politics in the papers. but social media has become the new norm, and I waste so much time with it. I'm a complete and total addict, and that's something that I've got to, get rid of, because I don't want to be implanting that stuff. And it's so relevant right now with everything's going on and all this doomsday shit. And like, it gets to a point where there's just so much information, and it's completely opposite of what we want to do, which is, as we'll get in these other chapters, which is being focused and being present. And it's just like, there's just this information overload right now. And it seems like what we really need is actually to go back inside. But yeah, it's a crazy time.
And if you're constantly facing this barrage, you're in reaction state, you're not in a creative state. I think you and I are supposed to be content creators as opposed to content consumers. I consume that much content that I've got to the point my flatmate has my phone and knows the password, and when I want to go on my phone for a specific reason, they unlock the phone for me, so I can't just mindlessly scroll because I can't get into the thing.
That's good. That's really good. I could use something like that right now, but yeah, that's probably a good idea.
There's a part here, it says, bear in mind, the only way in which you can assist the world in growing rich is by growing rich yourself through the creative method, not the competitive one. So the way I was thinking about that was Pam Jarbo always has this thing where she says, focus on growing vitalistic chiropractic instead of fighting with mechanistic chiropractic or chiropractors that aren't doing what you agree with. Just focus on your own shit, basically, and grow that, and people will come,
Completely. Yeah, I had a note about that, actually. Not focusing on what you don't want. It's like that phrase, worrying is praying for what you don't want. And so engaging in a lot of mental activity around the thing that you don't want is actually using the creative process to bring it more towards you. And where they talked in previous chapters about medicine as the study of disease has brought more disease, religion as the study of sin has brought more wretchedness. It is about, bringing more vitalistic, focusing on what is the entity we want to bring. And it was saying, you must fix your attention upon your mental picture of wealth to the exclusion of all that may tend to dim or obscure the vision. So anything, it's all about having that really clear vision, and say you want to grow vitalistic chiropractic, you're focused on that. But anything where you take the focus and put it somewhere else, it's dimming that vision. It's dimming the image and our connection with the formless substance. And you can serve God, humanity, in no more effective way than becoming rich by the creative method. And that really hit me, because serve God and serve humanity in no more effective way than becoming rich by the creative method. Because the only way that you could become rich by the creative method is by bringing into being something new that's of service to humanity. And that's the greatest service to God, is when you're giving that gift, and that creative versus competitive is so key, and something, even after we finish this, I want to continue to remember that. I think that's one of the deepest teachings in here, is that creative is more life for all. And it's not competitive. It's not competing with a mechanistic mindset. It's not competing with medicine. It's not competing with other chiropractors. It's not competing with anything. It's like creating more life for all, which, how awesome is that? We get to do that as chiropractors.
A thought that I had when I read that, because I was having this conversation with my flatmates the other day, and we were talking about the approach that we'll have to raising our kids. Do you think we've kind of lost, whenever we're teaching kids, we've kind of lost that competitiveness? Like, we're in the era now of participation trophies, but do you think a little bit of competition when you're growing up, if done in the right way, can be productive? Because if you say you have kids, how are you going to teach them creative thought as opposed to competitive thought? I think you need a little bit of competition as you're growing up.
Yeah. I don't think that necessarily this is referring to that. I mean, I think competition is really good. I think we need to learn to lose. I think, not everybody should get a trophy, that kind of thing. But the point being, are you trying to dominate others for a finite sum of things, or are you trying to dominate yourself by building will? You know what I mean? Rather than like, it's not about, you know, going out there and beating everyone else. It's about beating yourself, and it's about reining in the will and being able to focus on the one thing. And it's never going to happen without some boundaries. So I think of competition almost as against the self, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. See, that was my childhood. I was a boxer, and it was go and beat that other person. I was never really thinking about developing my art as a boxer. I was focused on beating you. I really wish I could go back and change it, but
Well, you can only act in the present moment. We'll get to that chapter.
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. Totally relate. Even to the point where I wouldn't even participate in things that I didn't think I could win, you know? Yeah, it was, I totally relate to that. And now it's part of my process of leaning into stuff that I suck at, you know, and not to win and beat somebody else, but to beat myself, to grow.
Yeah, get comfortable being uncomfortable. I've done that a couple of times with the Spanish, like entering Talk the Tick, knowing that I'm going to make a fool of myself, and then successfully making a fool of myself. But at least you're there trying, you know, and the Spanish is getting incrementally better. Yeah.
Totally. Jiu-jitsu is like that. You go in there and you're like, you think of yourself as whatever level of athlete, and you've competed and you've done well, and got somebody who's 50, 60 kilos that can just own you, you know? And it's such a demoralizing thing, but just opening into okay, I suck at this. I suck at this, but nobody woke up knowing this. You have to learn it.
And for chapter 11, another note I've made here, it says, arrange your own business affairs that you may be able to receive it when it comes to you. And the note says, ask Pat, hashtag ask Pat, seeing as Craig's not on Facebook anymore, it's ask Pat. It said, does that mean setting up a system and doing the work in the background so that when the time comes that the person's ready, that you're basically setting it up in such a way that you're making it very easy for them to pay you? That's what I extrapolated from it.
Yeah, read me the note again, just so I'm
arrange your own business affairs that you may be able to receive it when it comes to you. In other words, you work, and you might not get an instant gratification, an instant reward for it. But what you're doing is you're building the system, and then that means when the person comes and the person's ready, it's very easy and it's very quick for you then to get that money, but it's going to take time to get there.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable assessment of that. In all honesty, I found this chapter to be the hardest one for me, the one that I have the fewest notes on. And what I really got out of this one was basically whatever your action, it is evident you must act now and put your whole mind into the present action. And I think it was like, regardless of where you're, if you're in the current business you want to be in, or if you're in another business, if you're an employee, if you're doing whatever, I had to read this chapter like 3 times, but what I finally got out of it was, it's about how much are you acting in this moment. So you've got this clear vision or whatever, and it may not be what you're doing, but in this moment, it's that efficient action. Okay. So you're doing everything in that moment and not like checked out daydreaming.
Right.
So it's kind of present time consciousness was the biggest theme I got out of this chapter.
And as well, I think it's this chapter is doing the small things right. So even the things that, what I got from it is even the things that you might not be interested in, that might not be exciting for you, it's very important. That is a part of the journey to get to where you want to be. So you must do that properly with all of your intention. And it's not that you're doing it, you're doing it with the vision in mind of where you're going, but that's not what's your focus should be on doing it properly in the time that you're doing it. And I'm definitely guilty of that. Definitely, because if I'm very interested in something, I'll throw myself into it and I know that I'm capable of studying it. But if in my head it's not important, then it kind of goes out the window For sure, I'm guilty of
Yeah.
that. Even though that thing that you're not as interested in might help you get to where you want to go, you know?
Yeah, and I think even he's getting at the point where it might help you get to where you want to go, but just the act of focusing the will on being here and now, even in this menial task that you don't give a shit about, is building that skill set of thinking and acting in a certain way.
Yeah.
You know, which, God, we could all use a lot more practice at that. Maybe that's the chapter that I need the most out of this.
Yeah, and it reminded me another book that I'm reading. There's a note in there. It's called The Plateau of Latent Potential, and basically that means that you might not get an instant payoff from what you're doing. So it's the typical thing of the person that wants to lose weight, so they're on a diet for the week and they don't lose any weight, so they just give up. And the note is, it's like complaining about not having success despite working hard is like complaining about an ice cube not melting because you heated it from 25 to 31 degrees. Your work was not wasted, it's just being stored. All the action happens at 32 degrees. So you might work and work and work and work and work. Chiropractic's a great example, because think of all the systems that you're having to set up. You need to learn how to manage your money. You need to learn how to manage your energy. You need to learn how to adjust. All this stuff is taking time, and you're not going to get a financial payoff for a long time, years even. But then one day when all of the systems are set up, the money comes pouring in, or the patients come pouring in. So that's what I got from that. There, a good quote from, I was at a seminar once, and it was Jordan Belfort, you know, the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. So it's that guy. And he says, there's only one way to get rich, and that's quick. And he says, I don't mean it in like a get rich quick scheme, like a scam. He says, no, what happens is when someone get rich is there's all this stuff that you have to do, and you work and work and work and work and work, and it might take years to build up. But then once all those systems are set up, the money just, it comes pouring in all at once. And that's where the get rich quick thing comes from.
Yeah, it's the overnight success. It just took 20 years to get there. Yeah, it's basically, I mean, I've experienced that in my own life of just work towards something and no real success with it. And then just boom, it just happened. But it wouldn't have happened without all the previous work put in.
Yes. So if you make a lot of money in a weekend and people say, oh, he made that in a weekend. Well, he didn't. It manifested in the weekend.
Yeah.
It took 20 years of weekends to lead to that weekend.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And countless hours of study and thousands of euros of investment to do it, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's, it does very much seem like that. Like it's this kind of exponential thing at some point, because you're just working and there's just nothing coming out of it. And it seems like, you know, going from 25 to 31 and nothing happens. And then it just, yeah, that makes total sense. I like the way Jordan Belfort said it.
Yeah, it's not that the work is being wasted. It's just you're building up the process to doing it. So that's what I'm trying to do now. Everything that I do with this time is hopefully building up. It's not going to have an immediate payoff for me financially anyway. But then whenever I am on my own in practice, hopefully all this work is going to give you that compound interest, and it's going to come very quickly.
Well, yeah, and it comes in like, I don't know, just so many different ways. All the things you were saying, setting up in a practice and communication. Like, I set out, I think 2 years ago, I said, I want to get better at communicating from a stage, from our seminars and practice. And I just took every communication course that I could, and I wasn't good at it. And I didn't get it immediately. And it really was nothing but an expenditure of energy and money. It really brought nothing in.
Right.
Until it did. Until putting that time in and then building the skill, and then it actually transformed into something.
That fits into what he's saying there, is before you act, get a change of environment by action. So instead of complaining, oh, I'm not a good communicator. I mean, I'm sure your communication was decent, but say your communication had been really, really shit. There's two things you can do. You can sit and complain and be like, oh no, I'm such a shit communicator. Or do what needs to be done to make it slightly less shit and slightly less shit. And then eventually you'll be a good communicator.
Exactly.
So that's what I extrapolated from it, is getting into that momentum, getting into that small changes of action over time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's all cumulative, you know.
Mm.
And then acting in a certain way, like continuing those actions and still holding a very clear vision with faith and purpose and thinking and acting in a certain way. That's what does it.
Yeah.
Cool.
What were your thoughts on chapter 12, like with the evolution, not evolution, that's the wrong way to describe it, but you know what I mean? The
No,
growth.
that's what I wrote down first, evolution. Yeah. This one I actually read a couple of times as well, but I really, really, really liked this chapter because it is about evolution. The first thing that I wrote down was grow or die. Increased efficiency is evolution. And I remember Anthony Robbins used to talk about that. He was like, everything in the universe is either growing or dying. You know, you can't be doing both at the same time. You're growing or dying, just like a plant or a person, but at every level of being, not just the physical aspect, the mental aspect, the spiritual aspect. And that really is kind of what evolution is: evolution of a person, evolution of a species. And it's, you know, more than filling up your present place when you have excess life. And I think that really kind of tied in the chapter previous to that, which is doing things in a certain way or being present. And it's having clear intention, which is what you intend to occur and it's your vision, as well as attention. So you're doing things in a certain way. You're doing things from a present time consciousness space. And when you can combine the intention and attention, that's what really forms the formless. You know, that's what life is. It's from that mental spiritual plane and you're concentrating it, and that causes the material world to change. And yeah, that was just really powerful, thinking about how, I mean, that's really how life comes about. It's the will to power. It's a focus on something, and it draws it into being. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but
yeah, well, that's how you grow. So the note I made is someone's not going to get a promotion or a pay rise unless they are growing further than what it is that's expected of them. Whereas earlier in the chapter, he's like, some people will regress, which is death. But if you're doing more than what you should be doing and putting more energy into it, you will grow, whether it's getting a promotion or getting a raise or making more money, or it's under promise, over deliver kind of idea.
Yeah. And I even got the impression from this that it wasn't necessarily like just doing more shit or doing more, you know, like do. I got the feeling it was from bringing your awareness, bringing your consciousness to each action that you do. And what he talks about, efficient action. And I wrote that every action can be made strong and efficient by holding your vision while doing it and putting in the whole power of your faith and purpose into it. So that thing we were talking about before, where you can just kind of be checked out and just doing stuff, for like, how much can I bring my soul and spirit and aliveness into each individual action? And I found it very inspiring. And then after that, I wrote, there was something, actually, it was the very last thing in there. Contemplate your picture in your leisure hours until your consciousness is so full of it that you can grasp it instantly. So clear. You'll become so enthused, which enthusiasm is in theos, is God in the body. And you'll become so enthused with its bright promises that the mere thought of it will call forth the strongest energies of your whole being. So that to me was super powerful, because it's like, okay, hold the idea, you're a creator, act in a certain way, think and act in a certain way. But as you have it so fixed, you become enthused and you bring your being into being more and more. Your efficacy as a creator, your efficacy as a living being, as a soul, as a spirit. And that for me,
From a work perspective, in layman's terms, would you say that what he's saying is do the small things right? So even if it's menial labor, if you work in McDonald's and your job is flipping burgers and you want to be a multimillionaire with all these companies, at this moment you should be the best burger flipper in McDonald's and bring all of your being to flipping burgers as well as you can, even though it seems like
Completely.
a very menial task on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, bringing your best self to flipping burgers, it's not even to flip the burgers, but it's to bring your awareness into the moment that I'm flipping the burger, like this is happening. I am here.
We're kind of losing that. Again, we're back to the smartphones. We're losing that as a society. There's this constant, something that I've noticed, and I try and snap myself out of it, is I'll be doing work, say I'm doing stuff for school, but I'm not really putting all my concentrated energy into it. I'm kind of half doing it, half checking the phone, blah, blah, blah. And you don't get it done as efficiently as you could. And then when I'm finished, let's say I'm sitting watching a movie or watching Netflix or something, you still kind of have that stress. You kind of have that anxiety. So there's no like, I'm in work mode or I'm in relaxed mode. You're under this constant sort of refrigerator hum of non-productivity. And I enjoy it so much more when my work is very concentrated, the phone's in a different room, and this is what we're doing. And then when you come to watch the movie, you're completely relaxed and you know that you earned it. And that's when it really feels like a reward, like a break.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a much better feeling. And I think that's, kind of what he's getting at is when you can get the work done in that present way, it's not even like, I don't know. It's not even like you have to do it that way, but it's like, that is the joy of it. That's the gift of it is doing it.
Yeah.
And I think we all could probably use a lot more of that, especially after this whole downtime and everybody staring at their phones. Like, I'm completely guilty of it. Like, how do you fill up the time units during the day? And there's a lot of busyness, but not really movement, it's just kind of moving shit around.
For
also,
you,
like, I also think it's very important at this time to like give oneself permission to just not have to do right now, but still be, if that makes sense. Like, still, like, even though I'm not doing shit today and I'm, I've been reading but just like bring your presence into reading, bring your presence into being, be embodied, feel the room around you. Like, I definitely think there's a time for not necessarily just doing, for mindless doing.
Yeah. Well, you're, again, this is for chiropractors. Where do you think as chiropractors that we bring away our attention and we're not putting as much attention into the small things as we should be, because we're like, oh, fuck that, I don't like doing that, I'll do it later. Like, where do you think we do that as?
Like, in the practice of chiropractic, or in learning to adjust, or what?
Yeah, well, just in your own personal experience. But for me, what comes to mind for me is I've seen people in the adjustment room checking their phone. And I'm like, I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want the phone near me. I wouldn't want to be checking it in between patients, that kind of thing. But in the normal tasks of running an office, where do you think we need to put more attention and more focus and more of our presence and our being into?
Obviously all the steps that go into becoming a great chiropractor. So your adjusting, so your communication, things like that. But I think once that stuff's done, or you're working on that progressively, I think bringing your presence into each interaction and actually bringing your presence into caring about people, instead of like trying to do an adjustment. So, oh yeah, that was really awesome adjustment. I did that great. I rock. I'm awesome. This person's just there so I can do stuff to them, blah, 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 as opposed to, I think one of the things is, like, everybody that comes in your office, they're there for a reason, whatever that reason is, and just learning to connect and care more. My biggest issue, everything we talked about in the beginning of the call, was, external validation and doing it right. And a lot of times what happens is you get so inside your head that other people actually disappear. And I know a lot of people that, like, this is worse. You're having a conversation with somebody and they're not even paying attention. They're waiting to say what they want to say. And you're like you're not even relevant. You don't even need to be in the conversation because all they want to do is talk at you, right? And I think we can do that as chiropractors too, with our adjusting, with trying to get them to buy chiropractic, with trying to blah, 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 like not being connected with that other human being. So I think that's one of the areas that we can really, really grow as a profession is focusing on this is another soul in the world with their own unique perspective and lens and experiences and hurts and joys and dreams. And like, I don't need to be a psychologist. I don't need to know all their story. I don't need to do any of that, but I need to be present with them. And there's like this kind of energetic flow. It doesn't involve talking for half an hour. It can be in a moment, but realizing that, like that namaste, you know, the divine in me, recognize the divine in you, and knows that we're one. So like, this is a human being. So I think putting focus and attention there is something that a lot of chiropractors are lacking. And if you look and see a lot of the really great chiropractors who are really busy, I see all these chiropractors are so busy and their adjustments are shit, but they give a shit about people. They care about them. They love them, you know? And I think that's something where we can grow. Maybe that's just where I want to grow more, but I think as a profession, that's one of the core tenets that we need to do is just care about that other human being.
Drop in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Great stuff. Any final thoughts? We went off on a couple of tangents there, but it was still related to the book, funnily enough.
Yeah, completely. No, for me, what I got out of this one is be real clear on what you want. I mean, you see at the end of each chapter, he's starting to summarize it and add little pieces on, and some of it's not really redundant, but it's building a clearer picture. And it's clear picture, you know, thinking in a certain way, acting in a certain way, seeing it, being present, and bringing your presence into every act that you do, so you do it with the greatest efficiency and presence. And that's the mechanism that's drawing life to you.
All right. So, thank you, Patrick.
You're very welcome.
See you soon.
We'll do this again soon.